Hello and welcome. This is my first stream from our new apartment in Chicago. We just moved last week, and as you can see from the boxes, I am not totally unpacked, but the new setup is up and running. I hope you will bear with me as there's still going to be some adjustments and some hiccups to accommodate for. My second monitor isn't monitoring right now, so normally I have OBS over here and a document over here to reference, and then I have the thing that I'm working on right here, and then I have chat and Twitch material over here. Right now I have the one monitor, so I have my working document, and then I have Twitch and OBS over here, and I have to switch between them. So that's the way that things are. What I want to do today is two things. One has already been accomplished. See what the stream setup is like, right? Camera working, microphone working, getting stuff from the computer into the stream working. I'm currently running off of Wi-Fi instead of Ethernet, but our new service provider, so far, fingers crossed, knock on wood, has been coming through really well. So that is all very encouraging. The second thing I want to do today is work on some environments. I have, let's see, if this screen scrolling really quickly is going to be a bad time for you, right, from like visual stimulus standpoint or whatever, I would say just look away for like 5 seconds, okay? Fair warning. I'm going to scroll. Here we go. So here's what I have in terms of environments for this untitled environment book. You are seeing literally my working document. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these written. I don't have occupied town written. I do have an occupied town environment written in my Witherwild adventure, so I'm going to have to decide whether to grab it from there and use it or do something different, right? Like a dense woods environment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, so I want maybe 12 here. So that would be 10. We've got 9. If we add one more, that's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in tier 2. And then in tier 3, I'm just going to go back to OBS to check. Great. In tier 3, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 written. And I want to add 2 or 3 more to get up to 7. And then in tier 4, we started working on Arcane Vortex and Planar Incursion as a paired set of environments. The last time I did an environment stream. And then I've also got a couple others that I want to do, like a divine audience, like you go before a god. What's that environment like? And then exploring like a demon citadel, demon realm kinds of things, right? Because in Daggerheart's baseline cosmology, it's the circles of the fallen. So what that would give me for a book is, right, we had 10, 20, 32, about 32 environments, I think is my target, which means maybe a couple more at tier 1. Ideally, I'd love to get more of these at tier 3 because what I'm hearing in terms of feedback from Daggerheart players and GMs is they find that there's a lot of material at tier 1 and not anywhere near as much material. Excuse me, not anywhere near as much material at tier 3 and tier 4, which is understandable from a creator standpoint. You want to use material that you think people are going to have the greatest need for, but for this book, maybe I even things out a little bit, right? There are more environments at tier 1 and tier 2 than 3 and 4, but maybe I even that out a little bit more. What I don't have is a name for my environment series yet. Menagerie of Mayhem, alliteration, wonderful. Fantastic. Coincides with my nickname within Daggerheart creation as Monster Mike, right? Because of my role in working on monsters and adversaries more generally in Daggerheart. For environments, one, the word environment is more of a mouthful, right? So this could be, if it were arenas of adventure, that's not bad. Realms of Realms of X is pretty good, but having realms of something that then is the alliteration, that is a little bit trickier. So I haven't decided yet whether I want to abandon the alliteration bit for these books, right? Menagerie of Mayhem, and then having something else that alliterates would be really nice. What I don't want to do is delay this book just because I haven't come up with a title that I really like. I do want to get things out, but first, Bastion of Hope, the campaign frame of Defiant Fantasy, is going to be out probably at the end of April or maybe the beginning of May. I'm shooting for end of April, but fingers crossed, TBD. This will depend on some scheduling things with people. Okay. I'm going to scroll back to my working, to the tier 4 stuff. So again, if scrolling is, if fast visual scroll is going to be a problem, just tab away or look away for a couple seconds, starting now. Okay. So we're going to scroll this up so that everybody can see what I was working on. Arcane Vortex. So the idea here was that there would be a place where there's an arcane vortex, and then an adversary would be trying to use this arcane vortex to open a portal to another dimension. And then when that happens, we do a environment change, boop, to a planar invasion. Hello, Gethin. Unbound Arcanostorm from Wondrous Environments. I do not have a strong memory of that. So I will have to look at it when I can. Let's see. How easily can I pull up Wondrous Environments right now? We're doing it live, folks. Okay. I am opening my document. Arcanostorm. Here we go. Oh, so this is also a tier 4 environment. I'm just going to pull it over here. Whoop, here we go. No, come on. So now we're showing off the Arcanostorm. This is from Wondrous Environments. Oh, nope. I was looking, I have a window view instead of a screen grab. So I'm just going to tell you what it is, because I don't want to delay this too much longer. So the description says, a storm made of chaotic magic formed from a failed grand ritual of arcane power. It roams the world by its own untethered whim. Okay. Yeah, so this is a little different than what I was thinking, but possibly in a fun way. Because I think a arcane vortex could probably turn into an Arcanostorm as another thing that could possibly happen. So what we could do, and this is like, I don't know, brand synergy, crossovers. Anyway, right now I'm imagining a adventure path where you have environment 1, and then you can go in 2 different directions, and each environment is kind of a pool of its own, right? It's its own kind of hub event. or hub environment in a larger thing. I'm going to stop here because otherwise this is going to turn into a private business meeting between me and Gethin that happens to be live streamed, and maybe we shouldn't do that. I'm just going to I'm going to mute my mic real quick so that wait, how do I mute? Did my thing go away? Come on. Okay, I can mute here. Okay, we're back. OBS updated and some stuff changed, so I had to figure out what was what. Thanks for stopping by. Chat with you later. So, as is, we've got the Vortex here, and what we don't have for the Vortex yet is feature questions or feature prompts. All right, I'm going to italicize this. We don't have impulses. So what are the impulses of an arcane vortex? Warp, magical, right? So we have unstable portal. That feature makes spellcast rolls more dangerous, right? Easier to succeed at, but more likely to be rolls with fear. So warp, the weave of magic. Let's say right. One of the things is open this portal. Right. Yeah. Gethin suggests tempt the power hungry, right? Tempt the ambitious with the promise of otherworldly power, right? Somebody who begins engaging with the vortex will learn, oh, this connects to some other where, some other place. What could I get out of this? So that is 3 impulses, which is probably good enough to start. Here we're going to go on to some prompt questions, because as I finish these, this will help me refresh myself on the vortex, and then we'll move on to the invasion. Unstable portal is a passive that says this vortex roils and churns. I'm going to say churns and roils for whatever reason. That sounds better to me. It may be this alphabetization, but maybe it's something else. But if I do it this way, I'm going to say churns and roils with the friction of 2 dimensions. Well, churns and roils from the friction doesn't sound as good to me. With the friction as this vortex churns and roils as 2 dimensions try to occupy the same space. All spellcast rolls within very far of the vortex are made with a d20, replacing their fear die. Is that actually the language used when we replace the die? I'm going to be need to refer to the SRD. But now my mouse is being weird. Well, that's new. Huh. I tabbed over to an Adobe window and my mouse disappeared. I don't love it. So we'll leave that wording for now. Okay, let's see. So we go into prompts. What does the right? What does the extra-dimensional disturbance feel like for spellcasters in the vicinity? Is going to be one prompt question. How does this disturbance manifest in visually, aurally, tactily, tactilely? I don't know about that. What does the extra-dimensional disturbance feel like for casters in the Vortex's vicinity? How does this disturbance manifest visually? So all of these are first drafts. I'll come back to things. Okay, moving forward. Opening the Way is a passive. Select an adversary that wants to open the vortex and initiate the planar invasion as the instigator, right? This is riffing on the way that the divine usurpation environment designates a usurper adversary, right? And then the environment talks about things that they're doing or they're trying to do. When the instigator assembles what they need to open the arcane vortex and enable a planar incursion, set a long-term countdown representing the instigator's efforts. When this countdown triggers, immediately activate the stars are right. While this feature is active, while this feature, because if I say while this feature here, people might think that I mean the stars are right. This is a passive, which is active throughout when the environment is in play, right? And then, like Divine Usurpation, we have this ability to hold a higher amount of fear. Now, when I'm GMing Daggerheart, I try not to let my fear rest or kind of linger up at that maximum. Sometimes it will happen because it's not quite yet time. It's not time yet for me, or in my opinion, to bring in big consequences or to escalate, right? We may be in downtime where because of downtime, I've just gained a bunch of fear and I'm at the maximum or near the maximum, but I want to ramp back up to bigger danger rather than going immediately into it. If opening the way is setting up or is giving the GM that bigger fear cap as part of kind of an endgame or final arc kind of narrative situation, this gives the GM more of that ability to bank fear and then probably do several big things with it. Something else to think about is what can be done with fear in this environment, given the fact that the GM can hold a lot of it. This long-term countdown is something that the GM, in my opinion, will be able to spend fear on. As a reminder, as you can see from the text, we are using material from the Daggerheart Community Gaming License. While I was a designer on the Daggerheart core rulebook, specifically an additional designer, that's the credit. This is not an official Darrington Press stream. I'm just speaking about my own thoughts and opinions on the game. So when I'm GMing, I will sometimes spend fear to reduce a long-term countdown. I try not to do it too often or too quickly, because if there's a long-term countdown 10 and I have 12 fear, I could just spend 10 fear and make it happen immediately, and then it's not really long-term. For me, fear with a long-term countdown is a way of accelerating that countdown, not of skipping it entirely. And that's just my own mindset. Customizable maximum fear values in the Foundry integration. Yeah, right. If the Foundry integration is accommodating for everything that's in the SRD, there should already be a system to expand that fear cap, because the Divine Usurpation environment does that, right? I'm just going to make sure that I'm not completely hallucinating. Yes. That's the final preparations feature in the Divine Usurpation. Okay, good. So there could be environment or other situations that might increase the fear cap above 15 in certain situations. We're not going to do that necessarily here for this environment, but I wonder if there should be an equivalent feature. Yeah. So if we can see down here in the planar invasion that I did keep track of it, right? Fear cap. Does the fear cap go even higher? I don't know about that, but I think in the invasion we'd want to at least keep that cap of 15. Or maybe we'd change something in how fear is generated, right? Or increase in fear generation during rests, right? 1d4 plus 2 on short rest. 2d4 plus player count on long rest, right? Doing something like this, 1d4 on plus 2 on a short rest, 2d4 plus the player count on a long rest, would mean that the GM is constantly and is consistently being fed more fear, so that they can be spending more fear more frequently. And even if they don't spend it right away, they have that bigger max, so that they are not losing out on gaining fear in certain circumstances. Captain Cosmos says, I might go with 18 or even more, but provide ways that players could reduce it. That is very interesting. What this reminds me of, Captain Cosmos, is the Kinfire Chronicles game. So Kinfire is a role-playing board game, right? It's sort of in the vein of Descent or Gloomhaven, where it's a board game, but it has strong elements of role-playing games. Kinfire Chronicles is a cooperative card game in that same setting, and the bosses of each scenario in Kinfire Chronicles will have sometimes ways that you can do side objectives in order to reduce the difficulty of the main objective, or to make it possible to use certain types of cards to address key challenges. So having some element in this second stage environment that is a way for the players to reduce that fear cap back toward 12, maybe toward 15, if not all the way to 12. And that would be a cool way for players to feel like they are making meaningful progress in an environment that is meant to play out over the course of a number of sessions instead of here is an environment for one scene or maybe one session. Captain Cosmo says, I would probably tie it to a stress, hope, or even HP cost, or maybe one each. One location you have to pay hope, another HP, another stress, or perhaps temporarily vaulting a domain card. These are all interesting ideas. Hello, Alan Tucker. Thank you for the congrats and best of luck with your own move coming up. I hope it is as painless as possible. For me, moves are never painless, but sometimes they can be less painful than others, and I hope that yours is the least amount of painful that can be found or made or accomplished. So we're going to scroll back up here. And gains 1d6 plus Endgame. So I'm going to fold this in to opening the way, right? While this is active, the GM can hold up to 15 fear and gains 1d6 plus the number of and gains instead of 1d4. Right, and gains fear equal to 1d6 plus the number of players during a long rest instead of 1d4 plus the number of players. So that means that the Arcane Vortex increases the fear generation for the GM only on long rests, not short rests. And it's generally an increase of 1 fear. Right, the average on a 1d4 is 2.5. The average on a d6 is 3.5. You can't gain half fear, but we're talking about averages. So this is a little bit of an increase, right? If we jumped up to 2d4 plus the number of players, that would be an increase of about 2.5, right? Or an increase of 2 to 3 fear every session, or every long rest, sorry. So I may come back around to this. What I would love to do is playtest a tier 4 story arc where I'm using Arcane Vortex into extra planar invasion. I already have a lot of things to playtest, right? I'm playtesting stuff for Drakenheim. I can't really tell you about that because NDAs. And then I'm playtesting my own Daggerheart compatible stuff, including the Inspiration deck, new adversaries, environments, stuff like that. Okay. So, Advanced Guard. Spend 2 fear to summon a small incursion from the Outer Realms. 1 Outer Realms Abomination, 1 Outer Realms Corruptor, as well as 2 Outer Realms Thralls for each PC. They are here to annihilate those that stand in way of the coming invasion. Taking a drink here, just a second. Okay, so looking back here, I kind of feel like I want something more from Advanced Guard. Right, we're spending fear to do it, which, right, this is what we're talking about. If the incursion is not stopped by the end of the session, gain, or actually advance the opening the way countdown by 2, 3, 3. Right, it gets a third faster. Let's say by the next long rest. That way, the GM could have a cliffhanger with the incursion and not have that instantly generate fear, because that's a little... I think that that could work if the GM was being responsible. The thing that is easier and maybe clearer to players is by the next long rest. And I think that if the GM uses this feature but doesn't tell the players, hey, if you don't stop this by the next long rest, this countdown is going to advance, the GM would, I think, be in a pretty reasonable position to do that at the end of that long rest without having said so ahead of time. Okay, so is everybody done with all of their long rest actions? Okay, cool. I've gained this much fear, as is normal on a long rest, and because you didn't stop this incursion, this countdown advances by 3. Or you might even say, I'm going to advance a countdown. If you don't say something at all, you're kind of missing out on an opportunity to raise the stakes for the players, right? Or to instill a sense of dread. Why would you give up an opportunity to instill a sense of dread in your players? Okay, so we have the stars are right. This is a reaction. When the unstable portal triggers, let's just be really clear, right? When the opening the way countdown triggers. The other thing we could do is we could say, right, so this could be the ritual countdown, right, which is a long-term 10 countdown. And that way, we can say advance the ritual countdown, and then we can say when the ritual countdown triggers. Just be we're being internally consistent and clear. Right? Instigator travels to the Vortex and begins opening the gate to allow Outer Realms forces to stream through into the mortal realm and begin an all-out invasion. Exclamation mark. How often do environments have exclamation marks? Probably not often enough. So here we go. Set a consequence countdown 8, representing the opening, and if there are forces trying to keep the vortex sealed, set a progress countdown 10, representing the effort to close the vortex for good. When the consequence countdown triggers, the gates slam open, and the magical power floods the entire area, forcing the PCs to retreat. Gain fear equal to the value of the progress countdown, and shift to the planar invasion event, and immediately. We're going to have a serial comma here. Gain fear equal to the value of the progress countdown 10, right? The less progress the PCs have made in trying to seal the vortex, the more interdimensional energy rushes through and the more bad stuff happens, is the idea here. How does the world the gods takes action against the invasion first? What great powers seek to exploit this opportunity for their own purposes? Let's say exploit the chaos of the invasion right? Because if you're doing this at the end of a campaign, you probably have encountered some other medium to big bads, and they're not just going to sit out an extraplanar invasion. Depending on the big bad, they might help fight off the extraplanar invasion, but they might also try to accomplish whatever their own goals are while the PCs are fighting off the extra dimensional invasion. It's like, oh, you were fighting a existential battle against corrupting forces from an anti-reality. Cool. I own the empire now. That kind of stuff, right? So we've got our feature prompts. We've got some stuff. And now I think we're going to move on to our planar invasion and build this out. They have infiltrated the government, right? The thing I was thinking of in this situation was extremely Babylon 5, where there's a big meta plot thing that kind of culminates in season 3 and 4, and then other problems that had already been brewing advance while the main characters were dealing with the big meta plot thing. I'm trying not to be too spoilery. If you have not watched Babylon 5 and you like kind of big scale science fiction stories, I highly recommend it. The CG is now pretty dated, but it was quite revolutionary at the time. The first season takes some getting used to, right? There are a number of science fiction shows that take a while to warm up, but for me, Babylon 5 is a show that gets better, where just about all of it gets better the more of the show you've seen, because there's so much layering and reincorporation and foreshadowing and character growth. If you are interested in hearing more of my thoughts about Babylon 5, you can go and listen to the Skiffy and Fanty show, where I appear on probably 2+ seasons worth of rewatch episodes for that podcast. These are a number of years ago now, but chances are most of my opinions about Babylon 5 are probably pretty similar to where they were then, because I haven't rewatched the show since that time. Okay. So, from a chaotic anti-reality dominated by just a global invasion from a chaotic anti-reality dominated by outer realms monstrosities who swarm the world to consume all life. Tuesday. The impulse to annihilate meaning. What does shatter the realm from within mean? You'll get to figure it out. I don't have one particular opinion. So the Vortex was difficulty 19. We're going to say the invasion is difficulty 20, representing an escalation. I am disinclined most of the time to give environments or adversaries difficulties above 20, because it's not actually a bell curve because there's 2 dice. It becomes sort of a bell curve when you add an advantage or disadvantage dice. Anyway, statistics. consistently hitting more than a 20 requires a pretty big expenditure of resources. Now, in Arcane Vortex, having a d20 for your fear die means that you can hit those more difficult spellcast rolls. So I'm going to have to think about what I want to have here. So actually, let's say Weirdmageddon is the name of the 3-part series finale of Gravity Falls, a cartoon that I think is really great. I can't just have the name of this passive be Weirdmageddon. So right, the Great Unraveling. Do I have unraveling here? Did I already use that term? It's a fun term. Right, so the anti-logic of the Outer Realms seeps into our world, defying logic and sowing chaos. All PCs fear dice are replaced. Let's see. So we're going to do two things here, and this might be too much, but we'll find out, because this is supposed to be endgame boss stuff, right? What if an environment was the boss, right? The big boss, where defeating any given Outer Realms solo or leader adversary is just a part of the bigger problem. And the GM can hold a maximum of 18 fear and gains 1d4 plus 2 fear on a short rest, 2d4 plus the number of players on a long rest. Decapitalize those. I don't think they're capitalized in the book. Right, so here's the baseline for planar invasion. All PC's hope dice are reduced to d8s. The GM can hold a maximum of 18 fear, and the GM gains more fear during rests. That is as bad as it gets. And then, drawing on Captain Cosmos' idea, we're going to have things that will let the players claw back. When the invasion begins, set a dimensional integrity countdown. 6. This is going to be the thing that the player characters do a tug of war over. Dimensional integrity, when it ticks down, is going toward the world is ending, right? Your reality is. But if dimensional integrity increases to a certain level, the invasion will be ended. The thing I want to... this can get really complicated. So I'm gonna just have to keep digging. So bear with me. This may be a 3-stream design arc for this pair of environments. But what I'm effectively trying to do here is give GMs in like 2 pages the backbone of material for maybe a dozen sessions. Maybe not quite a dozen sessions, but I could easily see a GM taking what I'm thinking and playing it out over like maybe not 1 long story arc, but 2 long arcs, right? You have the enemy trying to open the portal arc, and then we have the invasion arc. The countdown advances when the Outer Realms major victory over a defeat or subjugate a major power of the world. Major nation, a god, a religion, right? In base Daggerheart cosmology, I don't think Titan is a term that exists. If I remember correctly, I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, Rowan. But your world can be the player / the GM's world can be whatever, right? Rowan has written a really cool baseline cosmology, but we don't have to only stick to it. I think basically the fallen gods are sort of like Titans, but you can play them in a bunch of different ways. What I want to convey here is the Outer Realms are trying to kind of take over, dominate, unmake the world piece by piece. And as the GM, you're going to be having them make specific efforts. And if they succeed, so let's do it this way. When the Outer Realms gain 3 fear and advance this countdown, the countdown can only advance or be increased or decreased by major events in the fiction. Let's just say you cannot spend fear to advance this countdown. This is going to go here. That way, the GM can't be like, well, this is a countdown and I have a bunch of fear and it says in this one part of the book that you can spend a fear to reduce a countdown. Or I don't want that. When the PCs save a victory against the incurred right, we're going to be really clear here because we have a tug of war countdown. When the baddies get a victory, countdown goes down. When the PCs or when this world gets a victory against the invasion, countdown increases, right? When the countdown triggers, the mortal realm has been completely unmade and is swallowed by the outer realms. Don't let this countdown trigger. You want it to not go to 0, right? Countdown reaches 12. The invasion is completely repelled and the vortex sealed. So this gives me meta structure, right? Seal the Rift is the big picture. Great Unraveling are the terms. I could get really complicated here. I'm resisting the urge to make this be more complicated. I'm trying to keep it streamlined, because what I could do is I could have a chart in here. Insert. Come on. Insert table. So dimensional integrity effect. Right, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I have 5 rows here. Right, so 6, 4, 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Right, because we know that at 12 the invasion is repelled, and we know that at 0 the world completely ends. Fear cap of 20, hope dice reduced to d6s. So we don't need this section to be very long, right? Because it's just dimensional integrity. Fear of, well, we already have fear cap of 18. So let's do hope dice reduced to d8s. This is going to start at a d10 instead, right? Hope dice reduced to d10s. That's where we start. Hope dice returned to d12s. Let's do fear cap reduced to 15. Hope dice returned to d12s. How do I feel about this? This is not too bad. I don't hate this. This text is still really wordy. I could add rows here for 0 and 12 that just say like invasion repelled at 12, right? And then at 0 world ends. I don't know that it's not as useful to have that in this chart, right? This is the thing that the GM wants to glance at. The world ends is not as much of a useful thing to glance at, right? Dimensional integrity. Can we do that? Okay, great. And then we're going to bold these for ease of use. So, right, fear cap increased to 18. trying to, again, condense and make this the easiest to refer to at a glance as I can, right? So this says fear cap first, and this has hope die first. F comes before H alphabetically. So we're going to move this around. Right, 6 is the starting value. Fear cap of 18, hope dice equal d10s. Do I want to put the fear gain on this chart? Also, thematically, it's important to note that this integrity countdown is going to be on a d12, right? It can go up to 12 and go down to 0/1. D12s are the special die of Daggerheart, right? So we're working in our land of theme here. In the Daggerheart homebrew kit, it talks about how a lot of things in Daggerheart work in 6s and 12s. So again, we're working in 12s here. Okay. We have done stuff with this. What I want to do next, and let's get this started before ending the stream. I want a couple of action features that are guidance for the GM on, okay, cool, you're going to do a thing that, if it succeeds, is going to reduce the dimensional integrity. And then we're going to have some reactions. Right, so reaction to heroes doing, it's reaction to heroes doing a thing. Okay, Mike, that's not helpful. Right, so dimensional reaction to failure that makes things worse. Mark stress, lose hope, etc. For a big environment, I'm still going to want to follow some of the rules that I set for myself with other environments, right? These are my rules for myself. They are not rules from Darrington Press. I generally want to have at least one passive, at least one action, and at least one reaction per environment. What we have so far is 2 really important passives. Okay, so let's say you know what we can do here is I have my Congregation of the End and adversaries from Menagerie of Mayhem. Am I going to cross promote my books? Absolutely. Why shouldn't I? Spend 6 fear to reveal that the congregation of the end has infiltrated a major religion and launches a coup to overthrow the leadership. Do I just use Divine Usurpation? Do we just get turtles all the way down? All right. That's a little much, but maybe not too much. Right? We are spending 6 fear to do it. And in my opinion, this is a thing that I've talked about before, you are not required as the GM to use every one of these buttons that an environment gives you, right? I don't necessarily have to press the button that says the Congregation of the End has infiltrated a major religion and launches a coup to overthrow the leadership, right? To overthrow their god. Spending 6 fear is a lot of fear, even in a situation where you can hold up to 18. All right, that's like spending 4 fear in normal Daggerheart play. There are no things in the Daggerheart core rulebook that say spend 4 fear. Okay, so that's one. Let's do something that's a little bit more specific. We're just going to have these things be big spend 6 fear actions. Maybe I'll pull it back later. Maybe I won't. To unleash a massive army of Outer Realms abominations. Beings to consume the resources of a nation. The PCs will be unable to stop the army on their own and must secure allies by completing and must mobilize by completing a progress countdown 10 before the consequence countdown 8 triggers. If the consequence countdown triggers first, entire nation's resources are consumed and the dimensional integrity countdown reduces by 1. Right? There's an army that's trying to eat up everything, that every natural resource in X entire country. The PCs can't fight off everything of that all at once. They need to mobilize allies / get get things, right? The trick here is that we're operating at a really big scale. And what I'm trying to not do too much is make this into clocks on top of clocks on top of clocks. Clocks, of course, being major inspiration for the the antecedent to countdowns in Daggerheart. Because if we've got a big countdown and then smaller countdowns, I'm probably comfortable with that. There are going to be GMs who don't feel like they need to give specific mechanical numbers to all of this, right? Because they have a sense of storytelling and pacing. Having the numbers means that everybody can be more easily on the same page about it, right? They know where they stand. If the GM gives a description and then a player looks at this and goes, "Oh, okay, I think we can afford to focus over here while this bad thing is happening," when what the GM meant was dimensional integrity is at the equivalent of 2, and you have to stop everything, right? You have to be able to stop both of these things before they complete. If the GM has the countdown out that says, dimensional integrity is at 2, and they've said, hey, if this thing happens, the integrity is going to go down by 2, not by 1, right? We could easily collapse this integrity die down to like a D8 and have it start at 5, maybe 4. 6 going to 0, right? That's 6 bad things. I'm talking myself into making this be a D8, but I like it being a D12. So I'm gonna have to scratch my chin and think about this a bit more, right? Because if the countdown is only ever going up and down by 1, that tug of war can last a long time. But ponder. This is the process. The real hardcore design stream ends up me doing this a lot, kind of squinting at my screen and thinking, and then changing my mind, and then changing my mind again, and pondering, how do I want to do this? But you're getting the real insight into how my brain operates here. So, right, we have 2 passives, 2 actions, maybe 1 more action and a reaction, right? Reaction that's like anytime you fail with fear, you lose a hope, or when you fail with hope, you don't gain a hope, right? Something that's pretty rough, and this is a thing I will need to test. We want this to be desperate, but not impossible. It can be rough, but it should not be so punishing that people don't want to play the game. So that's part of a trick with designing at these extremes when we're changing fundamental elements of how the game works. Right? Because reducing somebody's hope die to a D10 for a scene is really different than, for this story arc, the size of your hope die is going to be varying between D10 and D6, and then maybe getting back up to D12. That's pretty different. Thank you, Pluppy Bob. We drink to the cult of hydration. So as I'm like leaving this to sit for a little while, I do kind of like introducing the divine usurpation environment. It's a little redundant because the fear cap stuff is already increased, but what this feature does is it gives the GM another set of specific, or it refers to a set of specific tools from an existing environment to play out the details or more of the details of one of the things that could happen here. And as I'm working on this, I'm finding myself liking more the idea of treating a campaign endgame as a series of environments, or supporting an endgame with a series of environments that set the ground rules or the stakes of big parts of story. So I am talking myself toward a theory of design, which is interesting, and I'm going to want to ponder that more, possibly talk about it with other people, and keep exploring this idea. We have a way for players to reduce that fear cap, right? It manifests in this dimensional integrity countdown, which we have set up as a tug of war. And then we're going to have some kind of thing that will govern closing the vortex, right? Maybe this is something like when the countdown is at 2 or lower, you do XYZ. Maybe at 2 or lower, you reintroduce some elements from the planar vortex environment, but in reverse, right? Where you're closing it instead of opening it. If I reduce this countdown to a D6, right? Maybe from D12 we go to D6. What's that look like? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We would start at 3, 3, 2, right? 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 0. 3 major victories from the baddies. And then, yeah, I like 6 better. Okay. Value of 3. Okay. Starting value of 3. 3 major victories for the baddies, and the world ends. 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. 3 major victories for the heroes, and ends that. Now, the back and forth here can be tricky, and that's going to be something to play test, right? Do we instead have 2 countdowns where it's, if the heroes can trigger countdown X before the villains before the invaders trigger countdown Y, so that instead of a pure tug of war, it's a race. But there is a degree to which a tug of war makes sense, right? Because this is a war across the whole world, and kind of when you're losing, it's easier to keep losing is definitely a thing. But what I might want to think about is, what is a way mechanically to make it so that the momentum of this kind of an arc pushes toward the heroes winning, right? Because in epic fantasy, thematically and tonally, Daggerheart, as I interpret it, is a paradigm where the player characters are expected to win in the end. That's my take, and that's for the default tonal landscape of Daggerheart as I interpret it. So it might be, right, and something that makes it easier for the heroes to win the tug of war, right? When the PCs do when we increase the countdown and something else happens. Right? They could, right? We could have something that will help them win. Like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a comment, and then I'm going to list some ideas. Gain a domain card at your level or lower, right? So at level 10 characters, when they're doing this, could get another level 10 domain card, right? Which would drastically increase their power. Permanently reduce the fear cap by 2, right? In addition to all of this. We could what can we do here? Each PC gains 1 level advancement, right? They get a level up box where they can get to keep scaling up their power, right? When you gain, is that what they call? I'm trying to remember the specific terms here. Pardon me while I look this up in the index. I'm just doing a quick check here. I will need to, of course, double check this against the SRD. Okay, you gain advancements. When you choose your advancement, mark the appropriate slot. Okay. Level advancement. Yes, I think that is right. I'll have to go back and double check. Right? Each of these is not worth a full level up, right? Because it's 1 advancement, not 2. You gain 2 advancements when you level up. And when you tier up, you get other stuff, and when you level up, you always add a new domain card. But you might get 1 level advancement, right? 1 box that you could fill in. That would be a way to have the PCs keep on gaining power and have that be pretty, like, it's a big deal, right? It could be a new domain card. It could be you could permanently gain a stress slot, permanently gain a hit point slot, permanently increase your evasion, things like that. Captain Cosmo, I have not seen any third-party material in Daggerheart that offers rewards like this. Gain a domain card, maybe that's more frequent. There's probably stuff that does that. This meta scale of like endgame advancement is not something that I've seen in Daggerheart before, though. Well, tell you what, Captain Cosmo, I'm going to keep on pushing the boundaries of Daggerheart compatible design, and as much as and to whatever degree you and other folks working on VTTs are able to support it, I will be grateful. But don't necessarily worry about that just yet. If and when I am done with this and am putting it out into the world, right, then I'm happy to talk with VTT creators to whatever extent is permissible by the community gaming license. Okay. So this idea of special bonuses I really like, because it gives the players something to be excited about even when they're at level 10, right? If the invasion starts and they're already level 10 and we're going to go for another 5 or 6 sessions, this gives milestones along the way, not just narratively, but mechanically. This also opens up an interesting design space for other endgame / high tier adventure material, which is cool. Okay, so that's going to be all for today. If you were a backer of the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart Campaign Guide Kickstarter, you can go and download the first playtest packet full of material generated for the Daggerheart version of Dungeons of Drakkenheim. You can test out some of the stuff that I've been working on in the Drakkenheim project. If you are able to read this and bring it to your table, I would love if you could write in and provide your feedback, sharing your experiences to the form listed in that backer update. If you send feedback directly to me, I will be much more likely to become overwhelmed by it. If you send it through the proper channels, I can engage with it when I am on the clock. So I would request that you do it that way, as indicated in the backer materials. If you are not able to get the stuff to the table, but you read it through and have thoughts about what you think does and doesn't work, if there's other, if you like X but wonder if it might make sense more if it works in some different way, that kind of stuff is useful, right? The best feedback is feedback from play, in my opinion. But especially if you have experience with the Drakkenheim setting, using the original Dungeons of Drakkenheim 5th edition module or the other Ghostfire Gaming module books, Sebastian Crow's Guide to Drakkenheim and the Monsters of Drakkenheim. If you have experience with those books, or you are a fan of / are experienced with the Dungeons of Drakkenheim and the other Drakkenheim actual plays, I'm very happy to get your feedback on how well you think this playtest material manifests or reinterprets the material of Drakkenheim. So I'm happy to get your feedback there. And again, all of the how to do that is provided in that Kickstarter backer update. So that's going to be that. I'm going to say farewell for the day. Thank you so much to everybody for hanging out and helping me kick the tires on the streaming setup in the new apartment, and for your suggestions throughout. So thank you to Captain Cosmo, Alan Tucker, Gethin Pierce, E.C. Myers, Placebob1, Lord Soulwolf, and everybody else who is hanging out, lurking. Thank you to folks who are watching later on Twitch or on YouTube. And if you have questions about stuff that I talked about today, about these environments, you can post those on the YouTube for the YouTube archives of this, or you can go over to my Patreon and post the questions on like a relevant post there. If you have questions about Drakkenheim, I would ask that they go through that Kickstarter process, that kind of Kickstarter backer feedback form kinds of thing, because while I am lead designer on this project, it is not the only thing that I do and is not my whole life. And I try to have some boundaries sometimes between different parts of my working world. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, Placebob1. And now I will go to my ending. Farewell.